And that would be enough for most people, I think. But Mr. Allen, who's the son of a sharecropper, is also a former NBA player. You can see the effects of that right there. A corporate sales leader and a farmer himself, one who's helped to transform cultivation, production, and delivery of healthy foods to underserved urban populations. I'll add that his leadership in this work inspires many of us. It's really an honor to have him here. Dan Barber, immediately to Will's left, I would guess, will speak a little more about improving rural agriculture around cities. Dan, of course, is the executive chef and co-owner of Blue Hill in Manhattan and Blue Hill at Stone Barns in Westchester. He's also a prolific and wonderful writer, exploring how we can create greater consciousness around our food choices and a more ecological approach to cuisine in venues like the Times, Gourmet, The Nation, and more. Dan has spoken at Davos and at TED. He's on the President's Council of Physical Fitness. He's won Beard Awards for both Best Chef and Outstanding Chef. I'm not sure what the difference is between those. And he was on Time Magazine's annual 100 Most Influential People in 2009. His influence hasn't waned. Of course, all of this discussion is informed by sustainability, and so our panel's rounded out by David Wan, who is the president of the Sustainable Future Society. Mr. Wan has written or edited 10 books, including the best-selling Affluenza, Reinventing Community, and Superbia, 31 Ways to Create Sustainable Neighborhoods. He specializes in brilliant titles. He's also produced documentaries about sustainable towns and cities, including Designing a Great Neighborhood, which you can find on Netflix. And he isn't merely a talker. He co-designed the neighborhood in which he lives in Golden, Colorado. It might be the last you hear from me. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's start with some opening comments about what we need to be thinking about when it comes to defeating cities. So, David, would you mind starting?
Not at all. There are a couple of big picture statements I want to make. One is that the U.S. has the cheapest food in the world as a percentage of national income, but the most expensive health care. What's the connection? It's just right in our faces. We're eating junk food, and we're not getting ourselves properly nourished. A second big picture trend is we're using more and more of what we have less and less of, which is resources. Meanwhile, we're using less and less of what we have more and more of, which is people. And I think this urban growing can be a place, a nexus for change. If you think about what humans need, urban growing can meet each one of those needs. Whether it's creativity, expression, getting together with other people. Small-scale growing is a burgeoning trend in the U.S., and it's very exciting. And I know both of these gentlemen will have something to say about their own personal experiences with it. I would like to talk a little bit about creating regional food webs. And I'll let you guys have your introductory comments.
Dan.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to play the role of the skeptic, I think, about urban agriculture. My wife says that I'm the kind of guy, like, in the face of something that is inherently, like, really good, I'm always looking for the hole in the donut. So I'll do that today. I'll look for the hole in the donut. And for me, the hole in the donut is not that urban agriculture, more people growing food is a bad thing. Of course, I think it's a really good thing. Or that people like Will Allen, specifically Will Allen, isn't very inspiring, or that the consciousness-raising prospects of a rooftop garden aren't potentially really enormous. I was just talking to Mark about that before we came up. But I think that for the limited resources, economic resources, that are available to cities, my sort of suggestion, and this is to be a little bit reductive about a very complicated issue, is that I think the investment could be better spent in other ways. And I'm going to just say three quick ones. I mean, I think mid-sized farms, which generally aren't local to urban environments but are regional to urban environments, are a good bet for investment. These are farms that are a little bit too small to compete in the Walmartification of the food system, but a little bit too big to pack up a pickup truck and deliver to a farmer's market. These farms don't represent a small constituency. They're 350,000 farms such as these. They're basically gross receipts of about 100,000 to 500,000. They represent about 40 to 50% of the farmland in this country, and they, for the most part, are in a regional food system that surrounds urban environments. They are the ones who are losing out in this Walmartification of the food system. They're the ones who are losing out in the monocultures of soy and corn, and they're the ones who can transition to a more diverse, nutritious, delicious, sustainable food system that I think cities can invest in. The problem is much more of distribution, which is a very unsexy subject to both talk about and to invest in. But I think for the future, it's one that we ought to talk about more. And I think maybe if we have the time, Mark, we'll discuss ideas along those lines. I'm thinking of a Tuscan, let's say, milk executive who's looking at a spreadsheet and sees a truck that could go to one farm to pick up 500 gallons of milk versus sending 50 trucks to 50 different farms. At the end of the day, those economies of scale for the distribution are enormous. Economies of scale for actual production per acre, when you look at all the statistics, and I study this quite a bit, in part because Blue Hill, the restaurant which I run up in Tarrytown, is attached to a farm. Per acre over the course of a year, we're much, much more productive, tonnage-wise per acre, yield per acre, than a monoculture. But the calculations are distorted in the way that they're proposed now. So I would say that the reason that local food tends to be more expensive, there's a lot of reasons, and again, I'm being reductive about this, but I think one of the big ones is the distribution and infrastructure angle for which cities could invest in. I just round that out by saying that on the other side, it's sort of ephemeral, but I think that investing in full soil husbandry, which is more like a farm that envelops the entire farmscape, is one that usually produces the most delicious and nutritious food, and one that for urban agriculture, which is an artificial system. In Will's hands, it's a beautiful artificial system, and it's organic. So it's 100 times, 1,000 times better than Miracle-Gro. But it doesn't take into account a full soil and farm husbandry, which I think has knock-on effects for a rural landscape that are priceless. And I just end by saying that I think for urban agriculture, the value isn't in growing more food in an urban landscape. It's in what people eat in an urban landscape. And the diversity of an urban landscape is the diversity of cultures and of cuisines, which are attached to those cultures. And those cuisines have rotation, create landscapes. Those cuisines are built over thousands of years. They're inherently sustainable because their rotations to create that soil fertility are there. And if they're done right, usually cuisines that have lasted this long have been done right. If we adhere to them, if we encourage them, if we talk about them, if we celebrate them, they tend to provide the most nutritious and delicious food available to urban systems. It's not a knock on Will, but it's another look at limited resources that I think are worth examining for investment in the future.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. I hate to go against anything Will says.
Well, of course, I'm a farmer first and foremost. I mean, I run an organization, but first and foremost, I'm a farmer. And what gives me the greatest thrill, and I've been doing this since birth, is in my family, and the legacy of my family from the South that moved to Washington, D.C. area, right outside of Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, was to grow healthy food. And back in the 50s and 60s when I was growing up, my family would grow food and feed our family and extended family, and that's pretty much in a bigger way than I'm doing today. I don't agree with Dan in terms of what is possible. Because over the last 20 years, we're in our 21st year. We just started our 21st year in urban agriculture. And just to give you a picture of what's happening in our urban areas, because I'm fortunate to be able to travel all over the country, and I know most of the urban ag programs around the country, and to see how this has evolved into where we are today. I believe that we need both a rural sustainable food system and a urban sustainable food system. We need both for us to start healing ourselves, to be able to heal our healthcare system, because the only way to improve our healthcare system is to make sure that people are healthier. That's the answer. Politicians don't talk about it. Very few people talk about it. But we have this tremendous opportunity today to do that. And the reason I say that is because when I started 20 years ago with where our international training center is, we started with one farm. Today, just to give you a picture of where we are, we have 25 farms. We farm almost 400 acres, 25 acres of year-round production inside greenhouses to be able to feed the folks in southeast Wisconsin. We work with, we are able to drop our food into every community in Milwaukee, either through our CSA type program called Market Basket that started in 1995. As we've evolved, we have farm stands and farmers markets that we operate. We have actually farm stands at hospitals now. We have farm stands at housing projects. We have farms at housing projects. So we're attacking this thing from all sides. So I think that's important. The other thing to understand is, especially in the Midwest, there's thousands of acres of land inside our cities. You can take Detroit, for example, where we have a regional, one of our 15 regional training centers. Detroit has 169 square miles. 90 square miles of that city is unoccupied at this point. So that gives us tremendous opportunity to be able to grow food inside these cities. To be able to do it, yes, in an artificial way, because what we have to do is we have to grow soil. Because even if you talk about rural agriculture, or if you're growing in suburban areas, we're still growing in substandard soil. Our soil is 50% less fertile than it was 50 years ago. Everybody knows that. We don't have the same fertility in our soil. So we have to grow new soil, and that's what we do. That is at the heart of what we do. Last year, we composted 40 million pounds of carbon and nitrogen into thousands of yards of compost to grow what we do in the city. Because we have to resurrect what we've done to our soils. We don't have any digging equipment. We don't have any tractors or rototillers to till the soil. We're growing in new soil and compost. 24 inches of new soil on top of asphalt, concrete, hard pan clay to grow our food. In every one of our 20 by 96 foot greenhouses, we put 100 yards of compost in to grow this food. And this compost is high fertility compost. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, because it's about the nutritional value of our food. Everybody just had a meal. There's nobody in this room or nobody out there, or even Dan or myself, can tell you the nutritional value of the food that you just ate. We don't have a testing mechanism whenever you sit down to eat. And that's what we have to improve. And that's why it's important to be able to grow new soil, to be able to use worm castings like we do to grow our food, to give you the best possible way, but we need to go further. So what I did a few months ago, as I asked, we have great relationships with the medical community, Medical College of Milwaukee, and UW Medical School that we work with, and the School of Public Health in Milwaukee. And I asked some of the folks that I know, some of my colleagues, to join me in studying the nutritional value, and I thought maybe a couple of them would be interested, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to join this team. We had no money, we didn't have a grant. I told them I would fund this at the beginning to bring people together, and they had the testing protocols, so we're going to test 150 different crops that we grow, growing power versus crops that are coming in from 1,500 miles or further, because that you said earlier, that most of the food we eat, 99% of the food that's in cities is brought in from outside of the city. So what we want to do is start with aroma tomato. We're going to test the lycopene in aroma tomato. We're going to start with that, which is the good stuff that we should be having in our systems. The lycopene, when you eat a tomato, it's all about the lycopene. And we're going to test the pesticide residue, because everything that you've eaten today has some degree of pesticide in it. So we want to, and I believe this, but we have to quantify all of this stuff. We have to quantify the nutritional value of our food. So that's some of the work. That's the evolution of some of the work. But to say that we can't grow a significant amount of food in our cities, we can do it. We've got cities like Chicago, 77,000 vacant lots, 33 square miles of vacant land. We have 8 farms in Chicago, some 3 and 4 acres. So if you get enough of these 3 and 4 acre farms, teaching people how to farm, because one of the big problems we have in this country, whether you think of urban or rural agriculture or whatever, we don't have enough farmers. We don't have enough farmers to grow the healthy food that we need. So we're going to have to not only grow soil, but we're going to have to grow farmers. We're going to have to train farmers how to grow more intensively. Now we're growing at $5 a square foot. That equates to $200,000 an acre of production inside the city. So every square foot is very important. We are also growing our sprouts at $50 a square foot. In an annual year, that's over $1 million in an annual year, because those sprouts only take a week. So you're turning over that space every week to grow these sprouts. And we've been able to get this food through Cisco into our public schools, because you see Cisco is the only delivery system into the public schools, so you have to partner with those entities to be able to get our food. So this year we're on line to put 250,000 pounds of carrots into Milwaukee public schools. We're on line to, we've been feeding 40,000 students with our sprouts over the last 3 years. So this food is coming year round. We're growing this food year round. These sprouts we grow year round in our hoop houses. So I come from a rural agricultural background. So I understand, and I know rural farmers, and I know rural farmers are struggling today. I have a rural farm myself, a 100-acre rural farm. It's tough. Farming is the toughest profession. I've been fortunate to have a lot of different professions, worked in the corporate world, been a professional athlete. Farming is the hardest profession.
You haven't cooked yet. I'm scared of that.
I do cook.
Dave, can I just, I think that we're at a point where no one, including Dan, I know Dan was trying to be devil's advocate, but no one really thinks that urban agriculture is a joke at this point, and no one would argue that we could sustain ourselves only with urban agriculture either. You mentioned regional food webs, and I think that's sort of a key thing here. And could you just talk about that for a minute? And the other thing is, you mentioned, and you mentioned labor as a key resource, and it's something that rarely gets discussed. It does among people like us, but it's not in the broader discussion of how do we get more of our labor back into farming. And I think that those, Will just mentioned that, I think those are two key things I wonder if you'd comment on for us.
I think urban agriculture and farming at large is operating within a contextual change that's huge. The whole culture is changing to appreciate food more, for example. And the whole culture is learning, and we're being somewhat scolded about the idea that beef is going to take a lot more energy to produce, and et cetera. We're going to a different diet. That's huge. And yet, we're beginning to see the benefits as a culture of dietary changes, the kind of nutritional value that you're talking about. It's true that breeders, for example, sort of sometimes stumble into breeding seeds for nutritional content, but all too often they're breeding for size and color. It's not about nutrition. Oops, we forgot that we're supposed to have some nutritional value here. The carrot, for example, all of a sudden carrot seeds, we consumers started demanding oranger carrots, and that also provided more nutrition. So I think the contextual change I'm talking about is, I really do feel that we need antitrust with some of these large corporations that pretty much dominate and dictate what kind of food we're going to be eating. There's 4 meat packers that pack 80% of the meat, and that same thing is true throughout the food system. So I think we need to work at the same time breaking these larger companies into more usable pieces, and then also build up this urban agriculture. I think one of the prime targets for urban agriculture is the first and second rung suburban land, which will in fact need to be renewed. And I think as we begin to think about that book that I wrote, Superbia, that's ways to create sustainability in existing neighborhoods that developers or even redevelopers don't want to mess with because you have all these residents and so forth. But I'm seeing quite a movement of co-housing, intentional communities, so forth, that are saying, well, we want to have this common space. In the case of my community, I live in a 27 household neighborhood, and I tend to be the gung-ho gardener. I'm the community gardener coordinator, and we've devised a little system of neighborhood-supported agriculture where they'll just pay a small amount, and we'll have a good harvest by virtue of the fact that it'll get some volunteer work in there. We can pay volunteers to come in and work. And I'm very excited. I don't know if some of you have read a book called Owning the Future by Marjorie Kelly. She's got her fingers on something that is quite exciting, and that's cooperative ownership. And I think this is one thing that urban agriculture and agriculture at large could really benefit from. In order to cast our lot against the corporate, you can't even call them farms, the corporate industrial farming, we need to do as Organic Valley Company did. This is a cooperative in Wisconsin that started out just in Wisconsin and is now throughout the country, 500 or more farmers, isn't it, Will?
Yeah.
And so they're saying, we can compete, we can be that